My mom remembers it all too well. It was a regular night like any other, which makes this that much scarier. It was just my mom, my two siblings,
Okay,
and
cool.
I at home. My dad was gone on a business trip, as he would be often. That night, around midnight, someone started knocking on our door. My mom woke up and went to the front door and asked who it was. No one answered.
So loud.
She thought that maybe it was some kids playing Ding Dong Ditch,
Ding
so she went
dong.
back to bed. About 30 minutes later,
Gosh,
again,
like-
someone starts knocking. She gets up and peers through the side window to see if she can spot anyone out there, but
It's gonna
nobody
get
is there.
messy.
In any other neighborhood, this would just be assumed to be annoying kids doing some night ding-dong ditching. But in this area, you could never assume anything but the worst. My mom started to worry, so she went back to her room and grabbed my dad's shotgun, and then she sat in the living room in the dark, waiting. During all of this, she never woke any of us up, as we were all little kids at the time, and she didn't want to panic us. Again, while she was in the living room now, there was more knocking. She gets up to peer through the window again, expecting to see someone new, but still no one. My mom begins shouting at whoever it is that she's going to call the cops, and that if anyone tries to come in, she would shoot them. This threat, a legitimate threat mind you, apparently worked because that was the last of the knocking. At some time between then and the police showing up, my mom woke us just to be safe in the case that something bad happened. At about 2 in the morning, the police finally show up and do a quick search outside of our house while we waited inside. After their search, they come in and tell my mom that they had found a piece of barbed wire about 4 feet
I
long
have
next to
never
the
played
front door
Ding Dong
and asked if
Ditch.
it belonged to my mom. She said it wasn't hers and asked why. The cop told her it belonged to whoever was knocking on the door, and that they were likely planning on strangling my mom with the barbed wire when she opened the door to see who was knocking.
Oof.
They said that she was very smart to not open the door to see who was there, otherwise it could have cost her her life. The cops said they'd patrol the neighborhood until morning and do a thorough investigation once there was daylight. That morning, as they were searching around the house, they found footprints leading around to the back of the house leading to my bedroom window. They had
These
also
are
found
true
nicks
stories,
in the
by the
windowsill
way.
where the person was trying to pry open the window to break in,
True.
but failed. My mom always suspected it was this one neighbor because on several occasions, she would catch him staring into our house at her through his curtains, and he was incredibly creepy and unfriendly all around. He also would be the first one to know when my dad wasn't home, since he knew what vehicle he drives. Not long after that, we moved out of that neighborhood, thank God.
Hi, Tobias. Hi, Mr. Josh.
We had a new neighbor move in recently, which at first I was completely okay with
So
because we
it's
never really got along with our old
sticky.
neighbors. But boy, do I miss them now.
Why do I have to make everything
So
gross?
it was a few months back that we saw a new van in the driveway next door. No moving trucks or nothing though. We didn't see anyone moving in furniture or anything at all. It was kind of weird. To be friendly, my wife and I decided to go knock on the door to introduce ourselves, but no one opened the door, which was also weird because their car was in the driveway. We figured it wasn't a big deal. For all we knew, they were in the shower or were sleeping or something. So our bedroom is upstairs, and at one of our windows, we can see into the neighbor's backyard. The house next door has a detached garage in the backyard. The new neighbor's van wasn't in the driveway all day. Then, all of a sudden, when my wife and I were reading in bed, we heard the garage next door open up. Naturally, we were curious to look out the window and see if we could catch a peek at what the man looks like. We creased the blinds a bit to look out there, and there he was, this middle-aged looking guy in a white t-shirt and jeans. The motion light over his garage was on, so that's how we saw him. He was bringing boxes from his van into his garage. We stopped spying before it got weird. A few days passed, and his car wasn't in the driveway at all, until one night, we heard his garage door open again. Every so often on this one night, we would hear some weird scraping sounds coming from out in his garage, and then occasional bangs and such, probably from him dropping boxes in the garage. But what really did make sense was that metallic scraping sound that wouldn't stop. I went over to the window to look out again.
too, right?
This time he caught me staring. He looked up at my window, and I felt incredibly awkward. I walked away from the window, and seconds later, I heard him close the garage door. I told my wife I'm going to go out there and say hi. That's the only way I figured I could redeem the awkwardness I just created. I went outside in my shorts and t-shirt and went over next door to the driveway, but the man was in his van with the engine running already, and I think when he saw me, he backed out of the driveway really fast. Then he disappeared down the street into the night. The whole thing was incredibly weird, and I was getting the vibe he was avoiding us now. I was a bit curious now what exactly was going on with all the scraping sounds by his garage. I walked into his backyard to the garage door, and something was making noise in there. I I kept hearing thumping sounds. He had to have an animal in there or something. Then I heard my wife's voice call my name from our window, and she asked what the hell I was doing. I looked at her and put my finger to my lip. I tried to open his garage, but it was locked. That was enough snooping. I walked back to our house and back to bed. Later that night, I woke up to my wife shaking me, whispering that she heard our backyard gate open. I told her to stop messing with me because she was freaking me out, but she said she swears she heard it. I had to be the man of the house and go out there and look.
Fuck that.
First, I took a look out the window. The lights in the neighbor's yard were off, and our yard was too dark to see anything. I went downstairs and took a look out the front door. The neighbor's van was in the driveway. He was home. I went to the backyard now and turned on the lights. As I did, I heard someone running away to the side of the house, and the backyard gate slammed shut. I was horrified, but I made myself angry and chased after them. I ran to the gate and then to the front of the house, then to the street. I was the only one out there, yet I felt as though I was being watched from any possible direction. I went back inside the house, told my wife that someone was indeed in the yard, but I didn't see them. She asked me if I thought it was the neighbor.
Stop it.
I told her I honestly
You're
don't know.
ignorant.
The next day, I went to the neighbor 2 doors down, Gene, and asked him if he had met the new guy yet. He said no, but that he'd keep being awoken to sounds late at night coming from his garage. I told him about how someone snuck into our yard the night before, and he found that equally freaky and weird. We agreed to text each other and go over together the next time we'd hear weird noises to finally meet this guy. So the next day was Saturday. As I was opening all the living room blinds in the morning, I saw that it was like the first or second time that the neighbor's car was in the driveway during the day. Then I looked at his house, at one of the windows. There he was, standing stiff as a statue, looking at me as if he were waiting for me to open the blinds. I expected him to look away, but he just locked eyes. Unbroken eye contact for a solid 20 seconds. I waved because I didn't know what else to do. When he didn't wave back or even crack half a smile, I started calling for my wife. And when I got her, I told her to look out the window. But by then, he was no longer standing at the window. I said to hell with it at this point. I went next door again with my wife and knocked on the door and rang the bell. I felt knocking is a bit more assertive. I heard one loud slam from inside the house, but he never came to the door. This was the last straw. I went over to Gene's house again, and when he opened the door, he asked me if I saw his texts yet. I said no, and I also didn't have my phone on me. So he told me that last night he heard a muffled crying sound from outside, in the new guy's direction, and he texted me about it. Gene came out with me to knock on the neighbor's door one more time, and once again, no answer. We all by this point, including Gene's wife and my wife, knew something is seriously off here. The next day, the van was gone again, and it's been almost 2 weeks, and the van hasn't returned. We don't know where he went. We don't know if or when he's coming back.
When your neighbor be
These past 2
murdering
nights,
folks.
either my wife or I wake up in the middle of the night thinking we hear noises outside.
I yearn for a giant
And we go
desk.
to the window
Well,
to
this
see if
is
the van's
3
in the
desks.
driveway next
I have
door.
3
It's
desks
not.
together.
It's crazy none of us even know the guy's name. And we're still trying to put the pieces together, because one night I heard something definitely alive in that garage making noises. And then another night, Gene heard what he thought to be a muffled crying. Obviously he'll most likely be back, but I don't think any of us are looking forward to it. And maybe for peace of mind, we should anonymously report him.
Yeah, maybe call the police on that one. You ain't Shia LaBeouf. This ain't Disturbia. This ain't no coming of age tale. You ain't gonna get the girl. "10 disturbing true horror stories." Volume 8. Number 15. Steve Driver.
There was a brief period of time that I lived alone. When I freshly moved out of
Is
my
ISO
parents'
still
house,
here?
a friend
Somebody
met my
needs to get her
girlfriend
in the
and she moved
Discord.
I lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment in the downstairs of someone else's house. I spent a lot of time alone during this period of my life, besides when I was at school or work. And so I spent a lot of my time watching movies.
Okay.
Specifically, I liked watching scary movies pretty often. Even as an at the time
That stuff
21-year-old
is
guy,
so
I still would be a little
sticky.
spooked trying to sleep after watching a scary movie, especially living alone in that apartment. And every time I did, I would look around the room. At a few points, I would even turn the bedside lamp on just to check around the room. The tenant upstairs wasn't home that night, as his car wasn't in the driveway. so the sounds I was hearing couldn't have been footsteps upstairs or anything like that. My nerves were really starting to set in at one point because I just kept hearing noises, and to be honest, I couldn't tell from where in the house they were coming from. I got up to head over to the door of the bedroom and opened it. Outside of my bedroom was a very narrow hallway, which had a door to the bathroom, and then at the end of the hallway opened up to the living room. At the end of this hallway, though, like a scene right out of the movie I had watched not even an hour earlier, there was someone standing at the far end of the hallway right by the kitchen. The moonlight from outside coming into the bedroom windows and the windows in the living room was enough to see her, this woman looking right back at me. She started to walk backwards while still facing me. I didn't care though. I still screamed and backed into my room before slamming the door shut and locking it. She didn't come running over and pounding on the door or anything like that. Instead, I heard running up the half flight of stairs to the exit of my apartment, and then the door slammed shut. I was frozen in shock for at least 10 minutes before I felt okay to take my phone and leave the bedroom to check the apartment. It didn't take long. It was a small apartment with not many hiding places. It was empty. I rushed to lock the door, wondering who that could have been and how they got in. I didn't call the police. I couldn't tell you why. But the next day, I called the landlord and told
let
him
it be a
about
little cheesy.
He made a phone call to the upstairs tenant, and what I learned shocked me. The woman that broke into my apartment was an ex-lover of the man who lived upstairs. A crazy one at that. And after finding his address somehow, she broke into the wrong part of the house, my apartment. The upstairs tenant came down to my door and apologized to me that following day. But I never got much detail from him or the landlord. I still wonder what that woman was planning on doing to him.
Kill that bitch.
I'm not a fan of my dad's girlfriend at all. Not from the start. Her name is Kathy. My dad has been widowed since 2019 when our mom died. And I know he's gotten lonely and he's pretty much ready to settle with anybody now. Even Kathy. And against my warnings, he doesn't listen. I've been seeing her do some sketchy things around the house, and it's really starting to freak me out now. I'll start from the beginning. I have two siblings, my 10-year-old brother Jake and my 2-year-old brother Scotty. From the day he introduced her to us, I didn't like something about her smile. It was just unsettlingly wide and exaggerated. Pretty soon he'd start bringing her around a lot more, and I just never loved her, honestly. But at first it was only because I felt something was off about her personality. Then things started happening. She's been staying with us for a while now, and a few weeks ago, I caught her in my dad's closet while he wasn't home. My dad's safe is in his closet, along with where he hides the combination and some other valuables.
But thanks for stopping by.
When she saw me at the doorway, she smiled and said, "Hey, what's up, sweetie?" to me, with her annoying, creepy smile. I didn't say anything other than nothing. Then she shut his closet door, and I walked away to my room. I told my dad about it, but he didn't seem concerned. A few days after that, while my dad was at work again, I just got back from school, and I was walking upstairs to my room. And as I saw Kathy leave my little brother Jake's room and shut the door behind her. I asked her what she was doing in his room. She smiled and said, "I was just opening the window. It's hot in the house." I didn't answer and walked up to my room. When I heard her go downstairs eventually, I snuck to Jake's room to check if she actually had opened the window, and both windows were shut. Something was up with this lady, and I knew it, and I still know it. I told my dad again, and in response, he asked me to just please be patient with the situation, and that he knows I don't care for Kathy. I didn't bother telling Jake. Fast forward to 2 days ago. Jake, my dad, and I were all not home, and Kathy was babysitting Scotty. I came home unannounced, but I wanted to be secretive about it, because I wanted to see if I could catch her doing anything again. I snuck into the house and went to my room quietly. Eventually, from the kitchen downstairs, I started to hear Scotty crying. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to... Not regular crying.
To
like
dry
a very distressed
clear?
kind of crying. And I heard Kathy screaming at the top of her lungs to shut the F up. It was the first time I heard her raise her voice, and I believe it was the first time I was hearing her true colors come out. I ran downstairs to yell at her to leave my brother alone. She was startled and shocked that I was home, and for the first time, she didn't give me her creepy smile. She looked at me blankly, and went downstairs and shut the door. I called my dad and told him right away, and that night, my dad had a conversation with her about it. I don't know how it went, but I assume not good, because that night, I woke up in the middle of the night to something, and looked up into my room.
We're gonna let her dry.
There was someone in my room, and they quickly left the room and shut the door behind them. I got out of bed and opened my door, And as I got into the hall,
No.
I saw and heard my dad's bedroom door close. I went over to my dad's room and opened the door. And both Kathy and my dad were laying in the bed.
He's not a
I
great
woke my dad
storyteller.
up
Well, I like
furiously.
Mr.
Told him
Nightmare.
Kathy was just in my room.
Why are y'all
She
hating on
denied the
Mr.
whole thing,
Mr.
saying she was in
Nightmare?
bed. I don't know if my dad believed me or not, but he told me to go back to my room and he'd talk with Kathy. I obeyed, and I heard them
Emily.
whispering as I shut the door. I went back to bed, and I was scared. I'm still scared. I want her out of the house and out of our lives. I think she's dangerous. Why was she in my room? It's freaking me out. I worry
Right.
for my family's
Right.
well-being,
Right.
and I don't know what we can do.
He's right.
This one goes back a few years ago to when I was 30 years old. I was at my condo in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. My condo,
Yeah, I
which
like
I still
Mr.
own, is
Nightmare.
on the second floor of a decently
His voice
nice
isn't
building
like
that I won't name
annoying. He
for
doesn't like
privacy
overdo
reasons.
it.
Whenever I go down there, it's in the colder months up north, and I'm a complete beach bum when I go down there. Luckily for me, I work remotely from my job through my laptop and phone, so I've been able to retreat down there whenever I'd like. Fort Lauderdale is for the most part a pretty clean and safe
One of those
city.
giant
and the
leaf-bearing
specific location
hunks.
my building is
I
in is
agree,
no
I do need
exception.
one of those.
That is, usually. It was the middle of January.
Yeah,
late
baby's
at night,
huge.
past 10 o'clock.
He's
I
like
was
all
out on my
full
balcony
dude.
with my feet over the railing, on my laptop, when all of a sudden I
These
heard
hips,
from
they don't
down below
listen.
on the ground someone yelling something. They were yelling, "Yo," and "Hey you." At first I didn't move, taking the assumption that whoever it was talking to someone else. They couldn't possibly be calling up to me. But they followed with, "Hey you up there." And my heart skipped a beat, because now I knew they were talking to me. My main question was, why? I set my laptop down on the chair and looked over the railing down to the ground below. There was a guy in front of a car in the parking lot, looking up at me, and he said, "Yeah, you." I asked, "What's up?" He told me to come down there so he could show me something cool. I took a better look at this guy. Some guy with a backwards hat and
Well,
tank
I
top
mean, even
on.
if it doesn't dry
I assumed
clear,
he was
it's
just some
fine.
punky kid messing with me, so I ignored him and
With
sat back
the
down.
Makeup. it'll be
When I did that, I heard him laughing as he said, "I'm gonna come up there and skin you alive, you prick."
Whew.
I stood up again and looked at him. He had this unsettling and sinister smile on his face. I realized he looked older than I initially thought. He wasn't some kid. I literally opened my mouth to shout something back at him, but for some reason, I didn't bother. I grabbed my laptop and went inside and shut the sliding door. I expected him to yell up a couple things afterwards, but I didn't hear him do so. As uncomfortable as that made me, I felt much safer being inside. I chalked it up to just the occasional coked-up Florida lunatic on the streets. But things became next level when the silence of the room was broken by pounding on my condo door, accompanied with a voice yelling obscenities and threats at me.
Penis!
It was the guy again. The bangs were so loud, I
Nipples.
was genuinely concerned he was going to break the
Yeast
door down.
infections!
All I could do was yell, "I'm calling the police." That didn't faze him. His bangs turned to these carving and stabbing noises. It probably all lasted for about a minute or two, but felt like a century until he gave one more
Oh,
loud, angry
it's pretty
bang,
dry.
screamed one more
Fuck.
obscenity at me, then left. I knew because I checked through the peephole. I called the police after the ordeal just to show them and report it to them.
Can you get
On the
a
other side of the door, there were several
giant
stab
rimmed
marks
sun
in
hat?
it, confirming I did hear him stabbing at it, and confirming this man had a knife. I pray nobody was harmed that night.
Brock's got
I
a
doubt
sun
he
hat.
knew me. I think he was just a really drugged out crazy person looking to hurt someone.
Cocked up lunatic, yeah. I hate it when lunatics are cocked up. Is there like a specific kind of horror story you guys want to listen to? We can change it up.
I once spent a night in jail. I know everyone says it, but I didn't do shit. I was attacked by a bouncer at a nightclub in my hometown
Oh.
because some girl who I had history with was there.
Bing. Bing bong. Uh-huh. That was horrible. I cut off story number 4. What about the girl? She died. Ghosts can be waved off and don't leave anxiety. Are these leaving you guys with anxiety? Because they're true! Good job, baby. Uh, right here.
Before the video begins, I'd like to mention that these are not the most in-your-face and outright horrifying stories. However, they are the
By
most
yours truly.
believable and most reliable ones that were sent in to me.
Corpse.
Not to mention very creepy in their own way. I can definitely see a lot of these happening. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin. Number 1. Over the weekend, about 15 coworkers and myself had our company trip to the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, known for being Stephen King's inspiration for The Shining. We took an 8 p.m. ghost tour where we joined about 15 other people to get guided around the property and told stories about its history and creepy things that are said to have happened.
No
We
big
were
dick.
told to take a lot of pictures.
It's a cock and
I'm
a
sure
dry
this
whiter.
was
Oh, I
to try
didn't
and
see the
capture
pool, you
orbs or
assholes.
ghosts. Many green orbs were caught in pictures, but I don't think anything is as creepy as this photo taken by my coworker. A little girl in a hot pink dress who was definitely not on our tour. And apparently years ago, a young girl who was 12 to 13 by the name of Lucy was squatting in the basement of the concert hall, which is where this photo was taken, and she was discovered upon plans to begin some construction. She was forced to leave, the night
guys
got
can't really
below
see the photo.
freezing, and she froze to death.
It's
Everyone on my tour has vouched
picture
that
of
this
the
girl
girl.
was not on our tour. I mean, who wouldn't remember someone wearing something hot pink? The man pictured is our tour guide. No one would have been in front of him. I am convinced that this is the ghost of Lucy. Just one more added note, though I doubt anyone would believe me. But there was only one time throughout the tour where I felt any strange energy or feeling, and it was right there, heading down to the basement of the concert hall. Number 2. I used to work at a hotel, mostly night shifts from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I worked at the front desk checking guests in and out. This particular evening, I was all caught up on laundry and I was pretty bored just watching YouTube videos. This is where everything gets pretty weird. I was in the back when the phone rang. I could see if someone was calling from inside a hotel room because the digital reading on the phone read the room number. Room 323 was calling and I picked up. Front desk, how may I help you? There was no response. I waited a few seconds for something, but I heard nothing. About 10 minutes later, the phone started ringing again. It was room 323. I didn't think anything of it and picked up again with the same greeting as before. As you can guess, there was no response. I waited a few seconds until I heard a small sigh. This freaked me out and I sorta yelled, "Hello? Can I help you?" The phone hung up. I was pretty spooked at this point. Nothing like this had ever happened before in the 3 months I was working there. I eventually forgot about it when the bell at the front desk rang. I went out to a guest who said there was someone banging on the walls and making noise. I told him I was sorry about that and that I'll write it down and tell my manager in the morning, as there's not much I can really do anyways. I asked him for his room
Phone
number. He
crafted?
said he was in room 325, right across from 323. I looked up at him for a second when he said this, and he could tell something was off when he saw me. He asked me if everything was alright, and I said yes. The guest went out for a smoke, and I was pretty curious about this, so I checked on the computer to see who was staying in 323. To my horror, there was nobody checked into this room. I was very creeped out now. I started cleaning a bit and tried to make myself busy when the alarm in 323 went off. All the rooms have their own alarm. There's a panel behind the front desk where it displays all the rooms and the correlating alarms. I grabbed the front desk keys, went upstairs to room 323, and the
shaking.
door was of course locked. I unlocked the door and went in. It was really cold and I have no idea
Trios.
why. It was summer and the whole hotel was hot. This room was freezing. I turned off the alarm, locked and shut the door, and ran all the way back to the front desk, practically shitting my pants. Unfortunately,
shit
that's
those
where the story
pants.
ends, but I thought I'd share that one with you guys. Number 3. My parents were on their honeymoon to Key West. When they arrived at the hotel to
I
check in,
love
they were told that the room
Keys.
would be non-smoking. With my dad being a smoker, they requested a different room. They got the room switch and went to their room. As they got off the elevator, the smell of fresh paint was overwhelming. And down the hall, there was a painter with all the necessary
Time to
supplies
play with
laid out around him,
scissors.
and he was painting the wall. As my parents walked by him, they casually greeted him, and the painter had absolutely no acknowledgement of their presence. Whatever. When they got to their room, the smell of paint was even worse in there. So bad that it wasn't even bearable, so they decided to go to the front desk to change rooms. When they explained the situation, the attendant looked very confused and informed them that there wasn't a scheduled paint job on
Really
that
hope
floor for
someone
that
comes in
day,
right
but
now and
agreed
just
to
looks
change
like
their
I'm
room. My parents go back to their floor to grab their
cutting my
luggage,
face
and the
open.
painter is completely gone. All the supplies were cleaned up and gone within 10 minutes, and the smell of paint was completely gone as well. At this point, my parents were freaked out, but didn't think much of it and go to their new room. The next morning, on their way to breakfast, they overhear a tour guide talking to a group. My parents tuned in when the guide mentioned the floor that they were originally supposed to stay on. Apparently, a long time ago, there was a painter on that floor painting when he fell down the elevator shaft to his death.
Shaft.
Now, my parents don't normally believe in the paranormal, but after an event like this that they had no explanation for, it freaked them out a good bit. Number 4.
Number 4.
My name is Alex. I'm a 19-year-old guy, and I've been working at a hotel in the US for about a year and 3 months now as a server and houseman. And so far, everything and
Move that
everyone has been
contact
amazing.
over.
Nothing was unusual until a couple months after working at the hotel. Jen, from Human Resources, mentioned the name of a lady I had never heard before, Laura Ratcliffe.
Hi,
At
Mr.
first, I thought
Tony.
she was another employee, but I later found out that, well, she's the hotel ghost. To be honest, I wasn't really frightened. I was just confused because no one ever really told me or even mentioned her during the time I was working at the hotel. That is, until I started asking a couple people. A little description / background about Laura is that she was a Confederate spy born in Fairfax County in 1856. During the Civil War, she became an
gonna be
acquaintance of Major General
dangerous.
J.E.B. Stewart.
Exacto
Long story
knife.
short, she was married in
the
1890 and
face.
died in 1923.
You guys ever taken
It
an
is said that
X-Acto
she was
knife to
buried
your
somewhere
face?
in the grounds of the hotel, but her grave was made in front of the hotel.
Not a
They
good
made her grave
start.
close to the hotel, as shown in this picture of the front of the hotel.
Can't open it!
Then there's the sign where it gives
It's
a
a
brief
sign.
description about her.
Don't
But
do it,
others
Sammy.
say that she was buried somewhere else. I personally believe she was buried somewhere in the grounds of the hotel because, well, people have actually encountered Laura inside and outside of the hotel. I've never encountered Laura, and thank God I haven't, or else I would have panicked and left already. Anyway, some of the employees here have encountered Laura and shared a couple of stories. The following stories will
Don't
be
even
told in
trip, Doug.
each employee's perspective after their name is listed. Some of these people have stories about other people they know encountering Laura. Now,
Fake blood
onto the
test or real
stories.
blood?
We'll start with Amanda's
I'm just
stories.
that good.
I started working in this hotel for about a year now as a housekeeper, but I also help the banquet department. I've had a few encounters with Laura. All the times that I've encountered her were always in the bathroom when trying to clean them. So one day I gather all of my cleaning products to go clean the bathrooms. Nothing was going on in the banquet department that day, which means that it's more probable that the bathrooms are clean. Either way, I went to go check them to see if they were clean since it is a public area and any guest could use them at any time. Since I was only going to go check the bathrooms really quick, I decide not to use my doorstop. As I go in the ladies' bathroom, I let the door close by itself. As the door closes, I feel as if someone or something touches my hair. Then I hear what sounds like a woman giggle in my ear. At first, I thought that one of the guests might have been using the bathroom, so I decide to ask if anyone is using the bathroom. No answer. I decide to check each and every one of the stalls. Nobody was in any of them. The next story didn't happen to me, but it happened to the father of one of the
Might not have
employees
the camera
working
and the
here.
ring light?
He
What
said
ring
that
light?
one night, before going home from work, he decides to take out the trash. As he opens the
That-
dumpster, he starts to have a weird feeling as if someone was watching him. He then throws the trash in the dumpster, but as soon as he closes it, he notices a woman 40 feet away just staring at him. Keep in mind that the dumpster area is part of the hotel, so we close the gate at night. We leave the gate
go in the
open at
woods at night
day
unless
because
you'd
that's
like
where
to
the
make
cargo
a
trucks go
donation.
through. Anyway, this means that no person can
Or
get
step
through the
in my
gate at night.
poo-poo.
This woman is wearing a white dress, has black hair, and is barefoot. He decides to walk in a fast pace. He turns around and realizes that the woman is following him. Only this time, she's a lot closer. As soon as he enters the kitchen, he turns around and the woman was gone. He grabs his coat and leaves. A couple weeks after this incident, he quits and starts working somewhere else. Now for Armando's story. I've been working as a houseman in the banquet department for a while now, and all I gotta say is that I believe all the stories about Laura because I saw her. We had a function one night and I was the one who had to stay longer than the rest of the employees to clean up. Keep in mind that our department is on the second floor, so all of our equipment is all the way at the back. It was probably around 2 a.m. After I vacuumed the foyer and the room where the function took place, I bring the cart where you can place the tables. It's easier to place them on the cart than carrying them one by one to the back. Anyways, as I start to make my way to the back, I start to have a weird feeling. It was as if someone was looking at me, so I decide to look back. As I turn around, at the other side of the foyer, I notice a woman. She is wearing a white dress and has black hair. She stares at my direction for a couple of seconds, turns around and walks the other way. At that moment, I leave the cart for a bit and make my way to the direction where the woman went. When I go there, I see a different lady. The following conversation goes like this. Hi, ma'am, did you happen to walk by this area a couple seconds ago? No, I've been here the whole time waiting for my boyfriend. Oh, well, did someone else happen to walk by? No. Why? I quickly make an excuse that I'm waiting for someone and I leave. I then go to the front desk department and ask one of the late night employees if I could check the cameras, and they say yes. As I'm checking the cameras, there's no sign of the woman in the white dress. The only person there was the lady I talked to. The whole thing was just extremely creepy to say the least. Lena's stories. I've been working in the room service department at this hotel for a while now, and all I have to say is that I've encountered Laura more than any of the employees here. Employees aren't the only ones who encounter her though, because I know some of the guests that say that they'd like to transfer to a different room. When I ask them why, they say that the guest next door is taking a shower late at night or that they're loud. And then when I ask the front desk about the room next to the guest, they say that no one has checked in. Anyways, on to my stories. So my first encounter happened on my first year working in this hotel. I had my cart one night, and what I was doing at that moment was collecting all the trays that the guests leave after they eat. Most of the time, they leave the trays outside of their room. Keep in mind that it's midnight and I'm on the 11th floor at that moment. The elevator for the employees is past the elevator for the guests. As I pass the guest elevator, I hear a woman sobbing. I think to myself, what would a woman be doing outside their room at this time? I leave my cart and I quickly go check who's crying. To my surprise, nobody was there.
I would much rather have
I then check the elevator, but nobody's in there either. I start thinking that it's my mind playing tricks on me, but I start getting goosebumps. I left immediately and completely forgot about my cart. I was working one night when I receive a call from one of the guests who wanted to order some food. I make the order, and while I'm waiting for the chef to finish making the food, I prepare the tray. Once I receive the food, I make my way to the room. I knock and wait for the guests to open the door, but no answer. I could see movements through the people, but they keep walking by. At this moment, I'm thinking that they probably didn't hear me knock, so I decide to knock again. This time, I hear someone walk to the door, and they hold the doorknob, but they don't open the door. I know they're at the door because I can see the doorknob move, but they still have the door closed. I decide to back away from the door, and right when I look to my left, the guest, along with his wife, are walking towards my direction. They then said to me, "Oh, I see you got here before we did. We went downstairs to get the food ourselves, but the bartender said you were already gone and that you were probably at our door, so we got here as fast as we could so you wouldn't think that we weren't in the room." I didn't tell them that I thought I saw someone or something was in the room, because if it turned out to be Laura, I didn't want them to get scared or frightened, so I said that it was fine. I gave them their food, they closed the door, and that was it. Javier's story. One night, we had a big function, so we had some contractors. Contractors are people from a company that are sent to different hotels whenever those hotels need help. Anyways, Naomi, a contractor, and I were placing dirty plates close to the elevator to send them to the restaurant kitchen so the dishwasher can get them washed. I decide to take the elevator to ask the chef about the menu for the next day. The door of the elevator opens, and as soon as I put my foot in the elevator, I hear what sounds like a woman screaming. The scary part about this scream was that it wasn't a normal scream. It was one of those screams where it sounds like someone is getting tortured. I immediately run to the banquet kitchen and stay there for a while. Even though this happened a couple months ago, that scream will forever be stuck in my head.
Wait, what is the lurk thing? What does that mean?
The following
know what
story
lurking
took
is,
place
but
in
what does that do?
Norway in 2015. If the wording
The
seems a
real
bit
horror was
off, it's
different
because
to
the
me
story has been
anyway.
translated. I was called in for a night shift on Saturday at the gas station that I used to work at. I'm 19 years old and a guy. I'm pretty short, like 5'6", but I weigh around 190
Guy.
pounds. Because my lifestyle almost only aims for both powerlifting and bodybuilding, depending on which time of the year it is, I got really mad that I got that shift because I need a good night's sleep. But whatever, I needed money anyway. I shaved my head clean like I do every second day while keeping my full beard and packed 3 decent meals for the shift. I went to work at 11 p.m. and the shift was going to last until 8 a.m. whilst being alone until 6 a.m. I don't mind working alone. Some people get paranoid and everything, but I myself have the kind of facial features and build that most people would not bother to mess with. Even though I'm a
Flex.
very, very nice person, it doesn't really look like I am. I had some customers while working, of course. A lot of drunk people. Since it's Saturday, and in Norway, people tend to grab a burger or a hot dog at the gas station before heading home. Others just there to fill up on gas. But later, at around 4 a.m., when it started to get more and more quiet, I saw a stressed out woman a few steps away from the door outside. I couldn't exactly tell what she looked like from behind the cashier desk, but I could tell that she was stressed out, standing with her arms crossed together while turning her head to the sides and turning around every now and then. I was considering to go out and ask if she needs any help, but I brushed it off and was thinking she was probably just waiting for someone. But then she looked inside and began to walk towards the entrance. She came inside, breathing in between normal and heavy, and she sat down. I greeted her with a smile, and I could tell immediately that she was a drug abuser, and that she was really stressed out. She was dressed with normal-looking clothes and looked like she was in her 20s. She kindly responded with, "Hey," with an obvious fake smile where you could tell that this person is sad behind the mask that they're putting on. She then came to the desk, asking if she could borrow my phone to call her boyfriend. She said that there were people following her and that they wanted her hurt or dead. The following conversation goes on like this. "Are they looking for you? Like right now?"
Yes. Please let me borrow your phone.
"Sure thing, but
Feels bad.
wouldn't it be better if I called the cops for you?"
No, please. All I need is to borrow your phone for a quick call.
Long story short, I told her to go sit down at a specific corner of the station where there was no glass wall so that people wouldn't be able to see her. She called her boyfriend 2 or 3 times, but nobody responded. She kindly asked me if she can log into Facebook with my phone, to see if maybe she could contact him there. I was kind of unsure about this, but I am by natural reasons very humble, maybe a little too much.
Weird
Another
flex.
thing was that I was standing right behind her, so there was no unacceptable things that she could do without me seeing it. So I said, "Alright, you can log into your Facebook." I told her to use the Google Chrome app to go on Facebook and not the Facebook app itself, since I hate spending time logging in and out of my account on my phone. Call me a lazy bastard, whatever. She logged in, and long story short, no response on there either. She thanked me a lot for the help and was about to walk out. I asked her if she was sure about me calling the cops or not, but she was 100% positive about me not doing it, which was weird, I thought. Okay, well, be safe, I told her. Later on into my shift, I turned my phone on only to find out that she forgot to log out from her Facebook on the Google Chrome app. Out of curiosity, I checked the messages, which I believe every other person would probably consider doing. The most recent conversation was obviously her boyfriend, I thought. But there was nothing about come and pick me up or even the slightest thing that made me believe that this was her boyfriend. I checked the others below. Every fucking conversation I checked, which was about 6 or 7 of them, was either about drugs or money. Meth, coke, heroin, codeine, you name it. As humble as I am, I just felt bad for her, and I logged out without judging. 2 days later, I'm at the gym doing some deadlifts when I get a call from a number that is not registered in my contacts. I picked up.
Hello, Alan speaking. Hello, who are you? Who am I? You called me and I've already said my name. Who are you? You called me 2 days ago in the middle of the night. No, I didn't.
And then I remembered about the girl calling her boyfriend at the gas station 2 days ago.
Oh wait, I remember. I don't know her name, but I assume you have a girlfriend?
Then I went on to explain the situation. You may think, how the hell didn't I know her name when I had her Facebook logged into my Chrome app, but I simply didn't bother to remember it. He then responded that he didn't have a girlfriend. Surprisingly, this didn't shock me at all. I could tell that she was full of shit when I saw the messages with my own eyes, but I pretended like this was something that came to me as a surprise.
Oh, really? Well, that's what she told me, and I tried to help her out after that, which I've already explained to you. What do you know? What do you mean, what do I know? Has she told you anything? If so, I need to know right now.
I was really starting to get pissed off. First of all, I was being mixed into some bullshit for no reason now. Second, getting interrupted during my workouts makes me want to rip off someone's head.
She hasn't told me anything, and I'm really busy at the moment. Please don't call me again, because none of this is actually my business. It is your business. You helped her, you piece of shit.
Before I hung up, I told him to fuck off, otherwise I would take this case to a level that he would regret. I mean, obviously I would never kill him or anything, I just tried to come up with some dumb shit to scare him. I got a bit frustrated too. Why the actual fuck would that girl call a psycho who obviously didn't like her? It was clear that he was mad because he thought I somehow helped her, which I still don't understand what he meant by that. So, on to the rest of the story. My neighborhood is quiet, and my town is small, so it's not hard for anybody to find anyone. It's as simple as pasting someone's phone number in a specific website and their address will most likely show up. And eventually, I happened to get a little busy. As I said, the neighborhood is very quiet after midnight, and while being in bed watching some bodybuilding videos for entertainment, I started to hear someone driving towards my area. Well, that's not normal at this time, but it happens. Eventually, I heard a car park right outside my property behind my garden, which goes a little bit uphill filled with stones and flowers. So I couldn't see the car from that point on, but I heard someone opening the car door and locking it. What the fuck was going on? I quickly grabbed my tank top and shorts. After that, I would just be silent, trying to listen for every sound that I could get. I opened my window quietly, just to be able to hear a little bit more. I could hear the man walk up the little uphill part of my garden, which made some sounds because of the stones. I won't lie, I was scared as shit. I couldn't see him either, because everything behind my garden is blocked from my point of view by tall cements for the garage. The garden uphill leads to the balcony where a big glass wall is, and that's where my little sister's room is. I went to the exit of my door and quietly walked out. I walked to the cement stairs at the side of my property, which leads me to the exact same spot as him. I could hear footsteps, and I quietly walked up the cement stairs. Then I caught a glimpse of the guy. Probably the guy I was speaking on the phone with. Keep in mind, I still don't know what the hell he wants from me and why the fuck that junkie woman called him in the first place at the gas station. I know nothing. My adrenaline was high, but got almost to its peak when he was right outside my little sister's glass wall. I was scared, but also really pissed off. No way he's going in there, or trying at all. At the top of the cement stairs, I walked quick but silent until I saw that he could hear someone walk behind him just a few feet away. Then, I ran as fast as I could and pushed him with all my anger, leading him to get smashed into the wall beside my sister's glass
Get
wall. Before I
pushed.
proceeded to get over him and hold my palm over the side of his face, pushing it down while asking what the fuck he wants. My little sister woke up, screaming, which also woke my mother up. She ran out and asked what the hell was going on. Why my dad isn't home is another story, but anyways, my family's facial expression was filled up with fear, and I told my mom to call the cops. The man said nothing, just laying still with his left hand wrapped around my right wrist because of the pressure I was holding his face down with, while my left hand was holding him down between his biceps and shoulders. He was literally resting for a few seconds before starting to resist like a horse again, but he ran out of energy fast. I would ease my palm off of his face so that he could get his head up a little bit, only to smash it down again with anger. Both he and I were breathing heavily. I stopped asking questions, and my mother was on the phone with the police, always reacting with fear when the man started to resist again, but I told her it was under control. It didn't take long before the cops showed up and arrested the guy. I told them the whole story about both the girl and the guy. They were both just regular fucking drug addicts and have both been in prison previously for it. I was scared as shit and still to this day don't know why I had to be involved in this. Maybe he was just a paranoid psychopath. My lesson to you, never let some creepy stranger borrow your personal phone for situations like this. If it sounds dangerous, simply call the police to help them, and if they don't want you to, then just leave it. If you're at work, like I was, use the work phone.
If you're at the gym, like I often am.
I had just started working a graveyard shift at a grocery store in a big city on the West Coast. We were sat in the middle of a residential area, and we had at least one cashier on the floor at all times. The other cashier I worked with every night was named Barry. Barry was an old man who used to live in Chicago. I didn't learn a whole lot about him while I worked with him, as he was pretty secretive about everything. He was a nice guy though. He was the perfect example of a grumpy old man. You know, the kind that would yell, "Get off my lawn," and was absolutely fearless. They had a hired third-party security guard, and I use the word security loosely since it would be illegal for him to actually apprehend anyone. His job was to patrol the aisles in an effort to ward off thieves. On this particular evening, as I started my shift, I'd noticed a gentleman in nothing but dirty sweats lounging at our outdoor furniture display up at the front, which was only a couple yards from my station. I just ignored him and did my job since it took more brain power than I could actually spare, and it was the busiest time of the day for us. He stayed there for a good while until our security walked up to start a conversation, and he got scared and left pretty quickly. Fairly soon after, Barry approached me and told me that the guy was a local vagrant and that if he comes back that I should let him know because he had a history of harassing customers, especially for money. Seeing as I'm a very short girl with, at the time, very little strength, I told him I would let him know and went back to scanning items. Hours passed by, and when I returned to my station, I see him at the display again. Immediately, I called back to Barry and let him know what's going on. I'd never seen someone get from the back of the store to the front in such a short amount of time. Right behind him is the security guy. The store is pretty much empty at this point, except for maybe 2 or 3 lonely shoppers getting their 2 a.m. fix of chocolate, mac and cheese, or other comfort food. I try to keep my head down as Barry confronts the homeless man. I can hear the man start to get a little bit angry, slowly building up his yelling until he startles me, and I turn around to watch what's going on. Hand on the phone to call the police if I need to. The man stands up and he's really tall, like really tall compared to all 3 of us. We all hovered around the low 5 foots and he shoves Barry back. Barry went to move forward and the guy pulls out a long knife that he must have taken from our minuscule aisle of kitchenwares, yelling about how he needs some place to sleep, and he swings at Barry, who dodged it.
Barry.
Security hightailed it back to me at that point, and I called the police. In the meantime, it was just us 3 and this crazy hobo with a knife and an intent to hurt someone. Barry gave him space and kept his attention while I talked to dispatch. It would take them 5 minutes to get to the store. Barry tried his best to talk the man out of his frenzy, and for a while it seemed like it was working. Then the guy started advancing with a white knuckle grip on the knife. Barry stood his ground for the most part, but the man caught up too quick and swung again. Barry tripped, and I thought for sure that was it. I was going to watch someone get stabbed, and there wasn't anything I could do about it. Apparently, I had made some sort of noise because he turned back and made eye contact with me.
That missing girl from
I
the
couldn't
poster at
read his
Walmart?
face. My mind was just
dog.
blank. The security guy decided now was his time to shine, and he yelled something. I can't even remember what he yelled. Probably something about the police. The man bolted, and I watched through the storefront windows as he ran around the building and disappeared into the dark. The police eventually arrived and searched for him. They caught him, I heard, and he was sent to prison for aggravated assault, I believe. Barry was grumbling louder than usual, his way of expressing shock, I suppose, and we both finished our shifts before going home.
Barry.
That wasn't the last time I ever witnessed scuffles between Barry and aggravated people, but it was the only time they ever had a weapon.
Damn, Barry.
This story takes place only about 9 months ago or so, and it still works me up to this day. I've worked at GameStop for about 4 years and in multiple places, some
4
sketchier
years.
than others. I'm a
What a
key holder
dedication
there,
to
and I
GameStop.
often close the store, so
do y'all
I'm
think?
normally out around 10 p.m. The last 2 years, I've been at a rather nice GameStop in a better area, so I had discarded my habits that I had accumulated over the years for my own safety. I'm about 5'3" and pretty small. I'm aware that I'm a target for, well, nothing good. Anyway, it was about 10 p.m. and I had just closed with another employee. I don't have a car, so I had to wait for my ride, which was not out of the ordinary. She was running a little more late than usual, however. Whoever I close with always offers to wait with me until my ride shows up, but I always assure them that they can leave and that it's fine. The GameStop I work at is in a decent-sized strip mall plaza with many other stores, including a Walmart that's a little more than a quarter mile
these
up the
Walmart
parking
horror
lots.
stories that I'm
Most of
over
the stores closed a little sooner than us, so we were
last one
typically the
Walmart?
last ones out anyway. The associate I closed with walked across the lot and got into his car, waited about 5 minutes, and then left and waved his way by me. As he did, I noticed another car further back in the lot. It was the only car left, and I had just assumed it was someone else getting out a little late from their job. My eyes followed the associate's car all the way to the end of the plaza until he's gone. I check my phone and my batteries are low, but I can see that it's about 10:10. I was sure my ride would be here any minute. That's when I saw the other cars start to move. They must have been sitting there because no one had walked to the car since I had left my store.
Lurking.
They didn't turn their headlights on, which was odd to me, and started the gut-wrenching feeling that it was a little weird and that I should leave. But for whatever reason, I stayed. The car drives around the lot and then slows down, near me. At this point, I have my phone out just in case, and I have my messenger bag on my shoulder in case I need to ditch it fast. He pulls up about 15 feet from me, just outside of the first handicap spot. The car stops and is still running. It's an old, gross, beat-up two-door car with rust all over it. The door opens and no lights come on. Out steps a very large man that was most likely about 6'2". He had brown, messy hair and was brolic but still lanky. His clothes were stained with sweat or grease and he looked very unwelcoming. He had casually gotten out of the car, but then he turns around and clicks his fucking front seat upward and immediately, with the door open, starts walking fast toward me. I hadn't even realized it, but I was already on my feet, backing away from him. He kept eye contact and made a gesture to come back. Basically from there, I turned around and booked it to the Walmart parking lot. The sketchy guy got into his car and pulled around and started driving toward me. I don't know him. The store had been closed for over an hour. And it's dark, and the lot is empty. There is no reason to be approached like this. He still had his headlights off, which absolutely terrifies me, because I can hear him, but it's still very dark and my heart is pounding in my ears. I can't tell if he's right behind me or if he's leaving. I peek back and he's still slowly driving toward me. At this point, I'm certain I'm about to be shoved into a car and sold into human trafficking or some bullshit, and I'm in absolute panic, but all I can do is run. The Walmart was still so far away, and I was sure he would probably try to actually make an effort to get me in the car by then. I felt like he drove slowly behind me to tease me and scare me. But
Ooh, you're
then I
not
saw a
getting
big
empty.
truck in the very back of the Walmart parking
wait a
lot
minute.
with about 5 people
Where's
around
this
it.
thing went?
There was another car, and their hoods were up. Someone was jump-starting a car. I hauled ass to the left in their direction since they were closer, and as soon as I felt like I was in earshot, I started screaming for them to help and that a car was chasing me. The group looked shocked, and for all I know, they could have been sketchy too, but I had to take that chance. A man and a woman ran towards me and met up with me. I was pretty nervous, winded, and shaken up. I could hardly talk, but I looked back and saw the taillights of the car driving away. I walked towards the rest of the group, which was just a few people attempting to jump another car. I told them that a big guy was following me and that I felt very unsafe. They offered to call the cops, but I wasn't even able to see his plates, and I really just wanted to be home at that time. The 2 women of the group and 1 man were kind enough to walk me into the Walmart and even waited with me for my ride to arrive. I thanked them and went home. After that happened, I requested to open for about a week so I wouldn't be at the store after dark. The next day, I told my boss the time that it happened and we both watched the DVR in the back. It was incredibly uncomfortable to watch, but we forwarded it to the local police. The police didn't end up finding much, but they now keep a squad car patrolling the plaza from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. I don't take chances anymore. I wait inside the store until my ride calls me and I can see them. The whole thing really bothers me. I always felt like that type of thing only happened in the city or in unsafe places, but not to me, not here. I haven't discussed it much since, but it still bothers me.
Bad things don't
You're
happen.
really never safe. Just to state a couple things before this starts, these entries are all written by the same person. There will be a transition on screen between each story. I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been a search and rescue officer for a few years now, and along the way I've seen some things that I think you guys will be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time, they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old "stay where you are" thing and they don't wander off, but I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing persons cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked her where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the Bear Man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a
Bear
while,
Man.
and that's the last she saw of her brother. He was riding on the shoulders of the Bear Man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in the area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched the area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere, and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could have possibly gone because neither her mother or grandpa saw her come down. A few times,
The end.
I've been out on my own searching with a canine, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs. Not hills, not even rock faces. Straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling, and in those cases, we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff, or miles away from where the canine had led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. One particularly sad case involved the recovery of a body. A 9-year-old girl fell down an embankment and got impaled on a dead tree at the base. It was a complete freak accident, but I'll never forget the sound her mother made when we told her what happened. She saw the body bag being loaded into an ambulance, and she let out the most haunting, heartbroken wail I've ever heard. It was like her whole life was crashing down around her, and a part of her had died with her daughter. I heard from another search and rescue
part
officer
of her
that
is her
she killed
daughter,
herself a few weeks after it happened. She couldn't live with the loss of her daughter. I was teamed up with another search and rescue officer because we'd received multiple reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come
Myself
home
a
from a
black
climbing
fucking
trip when he
eye.
was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank.
Oh my god,
He
125.
freaked out and ended up
Knock it
trying to
off.
get off the mountain too fast, which
Knock
is
it off
why he'd
now.
fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night climbing down the mountain and letting out the most horrible muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it.
My eye just looks like a fucking mess.
One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and her backpack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to the base. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to the base, the more
I have an
agitated this
infection.
woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She said she wasn't going to go with him, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't know how to describe it. When we were within sight of base, the woman turns to me, and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human being can open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I
look
just
up
about jumped out of my
a
skin.
black eye really
I
quick.
hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left that area that night. Alright, this is the last one I'll tell for now, and it's probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this
Well,
is
top
true
heavy
in
here.
every search and rescue unit, but in mine, it's sort of an unspoken regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other search and rescue officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point, we've all gotten so used to it that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles,
talking-
at some point, we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods.
GG game.
It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it and that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same
Stairs?
thing. I wanted to go check
Stairs
them
in the
out, but
woods?
I was told very seriously that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them because it happens so frequently. I have a lot more stories, and I suppose if anyone's interested, I'll tell some of them tomorrow. If anyone has any theories about the stairs, or if you've seen them too, let me know. So I logged back on tonight and was blown away by the staggering amount of interest this seems to have generated. First off, I'll address a few things that you guys have brought up. There's been an overwhelming amount of people mentioning the similarity between some of my stories and those of David Paulides. I assure you I'm not trying to rip him off in any way. I've got nothing but respect for the guy. He's actually what inspired me to write this because I can verify a lot of the things that he talks about. We do have a lot of these strange missing persons cases, and most of the time they aren't solved. Either that, or we find them in places they have no business being in. I personally haven't been on many calls like that, but I'll share a few that I've seen, and a story my friend told me that relates to this. There was a lot of feedback about the stairs, so I'll touch on that briefly here, and I'll also include a story. They come in a variety of shapes, sizes, styles, and
Thank
conditions.
you.
Some are pretty
Thank you for the
dilapidated,
10
just
gifts, holy
ruins,
shit.
but others
Thank
are
you so
brand
much.
new.
Hello.
I saw one set that looked like they came from a lighthouse.
Thank you.
They were metal and
Hello.
spiral, almost old-fashioned. The stairs don't go up infinitely, or farther than I can see, but some sets are taller than others. Like I said before,
Chris,
just
thank
imagine
you.
the stairs in
My
your
white-
house
oh.
as if someone cut and pasted
White
them
eyes
in the
on
middle of
this.
nowhere. I don't have any pictures personally. It's never really occurred to me to try again after the first time, and I don't really feel like risking my job over it, but I'll try again in the future. I can't really promise
Thank you
anything.
so much.
A few people expressed confusion about the guy who ran into the man with no face. Just to clarify, when the climber ascended and reached the top of this peak, he saw another man in a parka and ski pants. This was the man with no face. Sorry about the confusing wording of that story. I'll try to avoid that in the future. Alright, now on to the news stories. As far as missing persons go, I'd say about half the calls I get are related to that. The others are rescue calls, people who fall down cliffs and hurt themselves, get injured by fire. You wouldn't believe how often this happens, mostly drunk kids. Get bitten or stung by animals or insects. We're a tight team, and we have veterans who are excellent at finding signs of lost people.
So tight.
That's what makes these cases where we never find any trace of them so frustrating. One in particular was upsetting for all of us, because we did find a trace of them, but it just led to more questions than answers. An older man had been hiking alone on a well-established trail, but his wife called to say that he hadn't come home when he should have. Apparently,
I made a
he had a
mess of my
history of
face.
seizures, and she was worried that he hadn't taken his medication and had suffered one out on the trail.
don't think
Before
so.
you ask, I have no idea why he thought it was okay to go out alone, or why she didn't go with him. I don't ask about that kind of thing
Neither do.
because past a certain point, it really
Wow.
doesn't matter. Someone is missing, and it's my job to find them. We went out in our standard search formation, and it wasn't long before one of our vets found signs
Yeah,
that the
they
guy
beat
had
the
gone
shit out
off
of
the
me.
trail. We grouped up and followed him, spreading out in a fan to make sure we were covering as much ground as possible. Suddenly, a call comes over the radio telling us to all head back to the vet's location and we have to come right away, because this usually means the missing person is injured and we need a full team to help get them to safety. We meet back up and the vet is just standing at the base of the tree with his hands on the side of his head. I ask my buddy what's going on and he points up into the branches of the tree. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there's a walking stick dangling from a branch at least 30 feet off the ground. The little strap thing on the handle has been looped around the branch and it's just hanging there. There's no way the guy could have tossed it up that far, and we don't see any signs that he's still in the area. We call up into the tree, but it's obvious no one's in it. We're all just sort of left scratching our heads. We keep searching for the guy, but we never find him. We even bring our canines out, but they lose his scent long before the tree. Eventually, the search is called off because there are other calls we have to attend to, and past a certain point, there's not much we can do. The guy's wife called us every day for months, asking if we'd found her husband, and it was heartbreaking to hear her get more and more hopeless each time. I'm not sure why this call in particular was so upsetting, but I think it was just the sheer improbability of it. That, and the questions that were raised. How the hell did this guy's cane end up there? Did someone kill him and toss that up there as some weird trophy? We did our best to find him, but it was almost like a taunt. We still talk about that one from time to time. Missing kids are the most heartbreaking. Doesn't matter what the circumstances they go missing under, it's never easy, and we always dread the ones that we find deceased. It's not common, but it does happen. David Paulides talks a lot about kids search and rescue teams find in places that they shouldn't be, or couldn't be. I can honestly say I've heard about this kind of thing happening more than I've seen it, but I'll share one of the ones that I think about a lot that I witnessed personally. A mother and her 3 kids were out for a picnic in an area of the park that has a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other is about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and according to her, she never lets them out of her sight at any time. She never saw anyone else in the area either, which is important. She packs their stuff up and they start to head back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very clearly established trail. It's almost impossible to get lost from the parking area to it, unless you're deliberately going off the path like an imbecile. Her kids are walking in front of her when she hears what sounds like someone coming up the path behind her. She turns around, and in the 4 or so seconds she's not looking, her 5-year-old son vanishes. She figures he's stepped off the trail to go pee or something, and she asks her 2 other kids where he went. They both tell her that a big man with a scary face came out of the woods next to them, took the kid's hand, and led him into the woods. The 2 remaining kids don't seem upset. In fact, she says later that it seems like they've been drugged. They're sort of spacey and fuzzy. So of course, she freaks out, starts frantically looking around the area for her kid. She's screaming his name, and she says at one point she thinks she heard him answer her. Now, obviously she can't go blindly running into the woods. She's got the other 2 kids, so she calls the police and sends us out immediately. We respond and we start the search for him. Over the course of this search, which spans miles, we never find a single trace of the kid. The canines can't pick up any scent. We don't find any clothing or broken bushes or literally anything that would signify a child being out there. Of course, there's suspicion about the mother for a while, but it's pretty clear that she's completely destroyed by the whole thing. We look for this kid for weeks with a lot of volunteer help, but eventually the search peters out and we had to move on. The volunteers keep searching though, and one day we get a call on the radio letting us know that a body has been found and needs to be recovered. They tell us the location, and none of us can believe it. We figure it has to be a different kid. But we go out there, about 15 miles from the site where he vanished, and sure enough, we find the body of the kid we've been looking for. I have been trying to figure out how this kid got where he did ever since we found him, and I've never come up with an answer. A volunteer just happened to be in the area because he figured he might as well look in places no one else would think to on the off chance the body had been dumped. He comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope, and halfway up, he sees something. He looks through his binoculars, and sure enough, it's the body of a little boy stuffed in a little opening in the rock. He recognizes the color of the kid's shirt, so he knows right away that it's the missing boy. That's when he calls it in, and we're dispatched. It took us almost an hour to get his body down, and none of us could believe what we were seeing. Not only was this kid 15 miles from where he'd started, there was no possible way he could have gotten up there on his own. This slope is treacherous, and it's hard for even us to climb on it with our climbing gear. A 5-year-old boy had no way of getting up there, of that I'm certain. Not only that, but the kid doesn't have a scratch on him. His shoes are gone, but his feet aren't damaged or dirty, so it wasn't as if an animal dragged him up there. And from what I can tell, he hasn't been dead that long. He'd been out there over a month by that point, and it looked like he'd only been dead for, at most, a day or two. The whole thing was unbelievably strange and was one of the most disconcerting calls I've
Shut up.
ever been on. We found out later that the coroner determined the kid had died from exposure. He'd frozen to death. Probably late at night 2 days before we found him. There were no suspects and no answers. To date, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. One of my first jobs as a trainee was a search op for a 4-year-old kid that had gotten separated from his mom. This was one of those cases where we knew we were going to find him because the dogs were on a strong scent trail and we saw clear signs that he was in the area. We ended up finding him in a berry patch about half a mile from where he'd been last seen. The kid wasn't even aware that he'd wandered off that far.
I fell on
One of
his
the vets
face.
brought him back, which I was glad for because I'm not really good with kids, and I find it hard to talk to them and keep them company. As my trainer and I are headed back, she decides to take me on a detour to show me one of the hot spots where we tend to find missing people. It's a natural dip in the land near a popular trail, and people will usually move downhill because it's easier. We hike out there, it's a few miles away, and we get there in about an hour or so. As we're walking around the area, and she's pointing out places she's found people in the past, I see something in the distance. Now, this area we're in is about 8 miles from the main parking area, though there's back roads you can take to get closer if you don't want to hike that far. But we're on state-protected land, which means there can't be any kind of commercial or residential development out here. The most you'll ever see is a fire tower or makeshift shelter that homeless people think they can get away with building. But I can see from here
Hang
that
on.
whatever this thing is has straight edges. And if there's one thing you learn quickly, it's that nature rarely makes straight lines. I pointed out, but she doesn't say anything. She just hangs back and lets me wander over and check it out. I get within about 20 feet of it, and all the hair on the back of my neck stands
Stop it.
up. It's a staircase in the middle of the fucking woods.
Is this a thing?
In the proper context, it would literally be the most benign thing ever. It's just a normal staircase with beige carpet and about
happened
10
for real?
steps tall. But instead of it being in a house, where it obviously should be, it's out here in the middle of the woods. The sides aren't carpeted, obviously, and I could see the wood it's made of. It's almost like a video game glitch where the house has failed to load completely and the stairs are the only thing visible. I stand there, and it's like my brain is working overtime to try to make sense of what I'm seeing. My trainer comes and stands next to me, and she just stands there casually, looking at it as if it's the least interesting thing in the world. I ask her what the fuck this thing is doing here, and she just chuckles. "Get used to it, rookie. You're gonna see a lot of them," she says. I start to move closer, but she grabs my arm. Hard. "I wouldn't do that," she says. Her voice is casual, but her grip is tight, and I just stand there looking at her. You're gonna see them all the time, but don't go near them. Don't touch them, don't go up them, just ignore them. I start to ask her about it, but something in the way she's looking at me tells me that it's best if I don't. We end up moving on, and the subject doesn't come up again for the rest of my training. She was right though. I'd say about every 5th call I go on, I end up running across a set of stairs. Sometimes they're relatively close to the path, maybe within 2 or 3 miles. Sometimes they're 20, 30 miles out, literally in the middle of nowhere, and I only find them during the broadest searches or training weekends. They're usually in good condition, but sometimes it looks like they've been out there forever. All different kinds, all different sizes. The biggest I ever saw looked like they came out of a turn-of-the-century mansion and were at least 10 feet wide, with steps leading up at least 15 or 20 feet. I've tried talking about it with people, but they just give me the same response my trainer did. It's normal. Don't worry about it. They're not a big deal, but don't go close to them or up them. When trainees ask me about it now, I give them the same response. I don't really know what else to tell them. I'm really hoping someday I get a better answer, but it hasn't happened yet. This is another one that was less spooky and more sad. A young